Hey guys, it's Triangle Face here with another game pitch. In the last game pitch I was asked if I could do an X-Men game, so let's get straight into it. So if I was making an X-Men game, I think with X-Men, when you're a kid and you talk about X-Men, one thing that I always talked about with my school friends was, what would your mutant power be, and what kind of powers do you think would be cool, and things like that. It wasn't often about being the X-Men, it was self-projecting and putting yourself in that situation. So I think with an X-Men game, it'd be interesting if you did a create character. You made up your own character that then went into the X-Men universe, and you could interact with other players online. They'd made their own characters, and then the X-Men themselves would act as people that give out missions and teachers in the school. So let's first off talk about the character creation. So what kind of things do we want to see? So what I think would be good is if you did a combination of powers and traits. So then you've got hundreds of combinations then of different types of character archetypes that will then build your skill tree. So starting off with your traits, you could have things like a weapons expert, martial arts expert, a scientist, a detective, like different skills you would inherently have. Now they would be non-mutant abilities that your character would have already. Then you have your mutant powers. Your mutant powers would come in different classes. So you could pick mental powers like telepathy and psychic powers. You could have energy-based powers, something like Cyclops' beams and Havoc's sort of lasers out his hands and that sort of thing. You could then have physical powers that affect your body, so sort of stretching, super strength, things like that, being able to Hulk out, all those sorts of kind of things. And then you would want to have things like elemental powers, so controlling fire, controlling the weather, things like pyro and storm, and those sorts of characters have. So what you end up with then is you could have a character with sort of psychic powers that's good at martial arts, or you could have someone with physical powers that's also a weapons expert, and you could have all these different combinations of types of characters and have different skill trees that go down the different arcs for sort of energy, matter manipulation, all those different classes of power types that then you would have to slowly unlock. And maybe even toy around with sort of dual abilities. So you could have like a dual character that maybe has some traits of different ones that gives you some perks and some benefits. Then in terms of skill distribution, one thing I think is quite clever in other games that do a similar thing is you can actually deliberately choose to have negative traits that give you more points back, and then you can put those points into other traits that you want. So for example, a simple one is if you're a character that can control fire, have that character weak to ice and cold attacks. So you deliberately make your character weak against ice and cold, that then gives you more attributes you can then spend on having more powerful attacks. The other thing with the X-Men and mutant abilities in general is they are random. So you're not going to really get to choose everything. So I think what might be quite cool is once you've picked your basic traits and your base power, the top tiers of your skill trees are then randomized. So you don't get to choose what your final powers are. They're not revealed to you at first. At certain points in the game, you'll then unlock a new ability, new limit breaks and powers and things like that. And they'll be random within the categories that you've selected. So you can kind of steer things in the direction you want to go, but the game will also give you that random chance that you'll get something really cool. I mean, all the powers are going to be good, so you're not going to be disappointed, but I think it'd be nice just to randomly discover a new power while you're playing and leveling up, as opposed to choosing it early on. So there's a lot of fun that can be had there, I think. Then obviously you can play around with your appearance. You can have people that physically look like mutants and have animal traits like someone like Beast, or you could look traditionally human, and then you can obviously pick all your attire and things like that. So on the subject of attire, and I think this is key in any game, is to have what your outfit looks like and the abilities they give you separate. Because there's nothing I find more annoying than having a really cool, say, set of armor that is going to make you really badass, but it looks ridiculous and you don't want to look that way. So keep those two things separate. I think, for example, Hogwarts Legacy did a thing like that where you could unlock all the different looks, you could get all the different outfits and things, but then you could have what you're actually wearing versus what it looks like. So a system like that, I think, is good for these sorts of games. So you can look how you want to look, but have the perks you want to have. So we've got traits, we've got powers, we've got artifacts and equipment and things like that will then help you build up your character. And there can be some really cool, interesting combinations of stuff there. So imagine having a character that's stretchy, like, you know, Mr. Fantastic or something like that, that then is good with weapons. So maybe they could wield swords and then have stretchy arms that use swords. Whatever comes to mind. There could be all sorts of cool things. And that's the fun of the X-Men, is just what if scenarios, what the powers could be like, what sort of damage you could do and what sort of abilities you can have. So that's the basics of making your character. I think then the game itself should be very sort of mission based. So yeah, there could be some overarching stories, but I think it'd be good to have some basic missions that you can redo. Imagine something a little bit similar to how Destiny was when that first launched. You know, you could go off on these different missions, you could redo them, and then new missions would come up as you progress through the game and you unlock different things. So something like that I think would be pretty cool. And you can have different classes. So you could have maybe Wolverine could issue out sort of stealth missions, and then Cyclops could issue out sort of some high-end threats to the public that you might go and look into. Now, the X-Men's got lots of different themes and has always been quite political, looking at sort of, the war between mutants and humans and human rights and things like that. So I think one element of the missions you go on, when you go on a field mission, there could be a score you get for your PR. So how have you actually made the X-Men look when you've been out in the field? So that's going to look at things like collateral damage and casualties and things like that. So if you're doing well and you're not causing a lot of collateral damage, you're not causing human casualties, you might then get promoted up the ranks in the X-Men to go on more high-profile missions, depending on what you need to do. Some missions can then have, perhaps there's something that needs to be done where they don't want the presence of the X-Men to be known. So those are stealth missions, and you've got to try and be stealthy and get in and out, do what you need to do without being spotted by anyone. So there's a few different things you could do there. I mentioned, Wolverine could be one of the people that gives out the missions for stealth. Cyclops could be the person that gives out the more sort of high-end media missions. And then you can have other characters that give you those different mission types, and then that's the story tree that you go through with them, and completing all of the missions for that particular X-Men or teacher would unlock new abilities or help you learn different things around the grounds. So you've got the Institute of Higher Learning. You start the game, you're a new student. You've got to learn the ropes within the X-Men campus, doing different tutorials, things like that. And then you can start being assigned missions and go out and do missions. The other cool thing about this is I think it should definitely be an online multiplayer. So when you go off and do missions, that then sends you into a lobby, and then you can team up with your mates and you can go off and do cool missions. And that way you can then think about who's going to be what type of character. So you could have somebody that's maybe going to have healing abilities, someone that's going to be a tank and be at the front, and then someone who's going to be a sniper and shoot from a distance and things like that. I think those kinds of things are cool in games where you can sort of coordinate with your mates and come up with your perfect team and how that's going to work together. The other thing in the X-Men is, of course, the Danger Room. So I think the Danger Room will be a key thing where you can then do PvP and have those arena death matches, because it's all sort of in a simulation. So you can go into the Danger Room and have battles with your mates online, or go into a lobby and fight strangers online and see who comes out on top. I think there could be a lot of fun to be had there. I think the game could also then have a slow release, so you could have level caps, and then when the next release comes out, everyone jumps back on the game. I think there's a thing to be said about having these stage releases, so it gets everyone's interest back into the game, and then that community comes back together and you start playing it again. Everyone gets the level cap. If you're really into the game, you can go and make a new character, re-roll your character, have new abilities, try different combinations, experiment with stuff, and then try and get that character to level cap as well. And you can lather, rinse, repeat. And I think that is your basic outline for a cool X-Men game. So I mentioned Danger Room, I've mentioned sort of going out and having missions where you need to worry about collateral damage and human casualties. The other thing that X-Men play around with a lot is time travel. So perhaps have Bishop being a character that can allow you to do some time travel missions, and that's going to have ramifications in the game as well. I think little time travel things are always really fun in sci-fi and comics and things like that. So maybe you do some time travel missions, and then when you come back to present day, depending on what you did, it can affect the grounds of the school, and it can affect what other characters and how they interact with you and things like that. That's always a fun thing to play around with. And then the other thing that tends to happen in X-Men is they go into space. So we can have some space missions and things like that. So have like an element of galactic missions going off into space and meeting other characters from the extended Marvel universe that exist in space. I think the other types of missions you could then have, some maybe the less story-based ones, but the ones you repeat, are things like escorting a senator. So, protect the cargo kind of missions. Maybe they're being attacked by mutants, then mutants come and save them, and that's going to affect their view of mutants politically. So, look, mutants tried to kill me, but it was actually a team of mutants that came to my aid. It was the X-Men. And that's kind of something that happens a lot in the comics and the TV shows, that the X-Men have that presence that they want to build that relationship between mutants and humans. And I think that's going to be important to keep that theme going in the game. and coming up with some different unique characters. Yes, it'd be great to see some cameos and old characters, especially with the villains, so you can fight different characters from the comics and previous games and cartoons and things like that we know. But it'd be cool to see some random new characters as well. It's an excuse to have a play around with some different enemies and different enemy types. Well, that is my game pitch. Let me know what you think. How would you do an X-Men game? Are there any other games you would like to hear me pitch? Thanks for watching. See you next time.